December quarterly inflation figures will be revealed in just a few hours' time. That could have a huge flow-on effect, not just for mortgage holders, but the election. Let's argue this with our lively Wednesday panel. Liberal MP Keith Wallahan and Labor MP Dan Mulino standing in for Julian Hill today. Dan, good to see you. Welcome to the Rumble. Keith, hello to you. So,
Morning.
Keith, we'll start in tennis parlance.
Sure.
If the number is soft today, is it advantage Labor?
You know what? It actually doesn't matter. When you have seen the largest collapse in living standards since the early 90s, what matters to families, and they need to see inflation come down quicker. So we want to see a number that comes down. This isn't about political self-interest, it's about the national interest. And we wish that the government had made the decisions that would have made this occur earlier, because the government has done two things. They have cranked government spending at record levels. It's at 28% of GDP when the national average has been 22%, and they have doubled net overseas migration. Those are the only two reasons we don't have an actual recession on our hands.
Yeah, but you know what Jim Chalmers is going to say today, if it is soft, and look, we're speculating here, but it'll be, look where inflation has come. We're getting into the low threes now, so what we're doing is working. Well,
what he's going to say is Australians have never had it so good, and that's just insulting to Australian families, and it's insulting to Australian businesses. Again, we have seen record insolvencies, particularly in the December quarter.
Yep, that's true. Okay, Dan, over to you. So just a response to that, and regardless of the outcome today, as folks struggle, and Deloitte is painting a pretty sad picture of our living standards, it's not going to return to pre-pandemic levels until 2030. So is it too little, too late for you if today is good news for you?
Well, Pete, thanks for having me on, and nice to see you continue the Australian Open theme after the conclusion of the formal tennis. But look, today's numbers do matter, and the government is not complacent at all, because we understand that people are doing it tough. But what we are confident and hopeful of seeing is that inflation will continue its downward march that we've seen for the last 2 years. When we came to office way back in 2022, inflation was far higher than it is now, and it was rising fast, and the interest rate increasing cycle had already started. It's absolutely critical that inflation continues to come down. Firstly, because as the RBA and all economists will tell you, inflation eats away at people's living standards. And I talk to people every day who talk about cost of living, of course. And secondly, because we need to get inflation into the 2 to 3% band so that we can start to see interest rates coming down. What we've seen is that both headline and trimmed mean inflation have come down markedly since late 2022. This is a trend that has been sustained, and it's a really important trend reflecting government policies.
Right, but could this have happened faster had you not been putting fuel on the fire, as Keith pointed out, of record spending?
Well, I wouldn't accept that characterisation. Firstly, this government has delivered consecutive surpluses, the first government in decades to do so. The previous government, of course, said they would deliver a whole raft of surpluses and delivered 0 out of 9. Those surpluses contributed significantly to downward pressure on inflation, as macroeconomists have said, and as the RBA governor herself has said. Secondly, the government has banked a very high proportion of the fiscal uplift that came as a result of stronger labour markets and higher commodities prices. That's put significant downward pressure on government debt. So we've managed the government spending in a way that has helped with the inflation fight, but we've also done it in a way that's responsible. We've given people well-targeted and calibrated help with energy rebates, with rental assistance. I think now it's incumbent on the opposition, if they want to say that there's too much assistance being given to households, what is it they're going to cut? Are they going to cut the energy rebates? Are they going to pull back on rental assistance? Are they going to increase Middle Australia's income taxes? It's now incumbent upon them to actually be specific if they say that government spending is too high.
Well, why don't you answer that, Keith?
Dan Mulino is someone who I respect highly. He chairs the economics committee I'm on. He has an actual PhD in economics, unlike the Treasurer, who has a PhD in Paul Keating. So I hope, hot tip for the Prime Minister, I hope he elevates Dan Mulino to that position sooner rather than later. But it was disappointing to hear Dan go to that scare campaign. What's the government going to cut? It's about efficiency. We have seen government spending at 28% of GDP. It should be at 22%. We can find efficiencies. We've seen the public service, and I respect the public servants who work hard for Australia, but it has ballooned by 36,000 when we have a defence force shortage of 5,000. The government's priorities are wrong. Families are finding efficiencies. The government can find efficiencies. And if we're elected, we will find efficiencies.
Okay, and where would you like to find efficiencies, Dan?
Well, look, I respect Keith also, but with all due respect, I just don't think efficiency is going to get to the point where the opposition says that it wants to get to. Members of the opposition, including the leader, Peter Dutton, and senior members of the shadow cabinet have been throwing huge numbers around in the public discussion, hundreds of billions of dollars of public spending they say that is too much. But when you look at the actual composition of the government spending that they say is unnecessary, it goes to things like indexing the pension. So it's not a scare campaign, and I don't think it's unreasonable to ask if you say that government spending is way too high, which Peter Dutton and Angus Taylor and others have said. It's going to take more than efficiency to significantly reduce government spending. Right. And that's where we get to things like the core assistance for cost of living and pensions and other things like that.
Okay, Dan and Keith, friendly fire today. A lot of respect on show. Good to see you both. Thank you. We will talk to you again soon.